For some reason, I only allowed myself 24 hours at Sleeping Bear Dunes. Actually, more like 18 hours after I checked in and got my bearings. It's the world's largest collection of freshwater sand dunes with formations that rise up to 400 feet above the lake. The famous dunes of Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore were sculpted by the advance and retreat of huge glaciers about 2 million years ago. From the top of the highest dune, it's 450 feet down to Lake Michigan. However, the place most people start their decline is at the 284-foot mark. There's a sign clearly stating the $3,000 fine if you run down to the bottom and need to be rescued to get back up. Although I did see one group of people run down to an awaiting boat and completely avoid the climb back to the top. This is the most popular hike that you will see on social media all the time that some people think it's fun to climb. The 284-foot, 45-degree world-famous dune drop down soft white sand. It's about the equivalent of an 11-story building. You can also explore the dunes from the top, where there's a wooden observation deck and some hiking trails for a beautiful view of Glen Lake and more dunes that you can climb to the top of. If you're not sure about attempting the hike down to Lake Michigan and back up, try climbing these dunes first to see how you do. I found it pretty strenuous climbing in the soft sand, and it solidified my decision to not attempt the big dune drop. I did stay and watch some people to see how long the hike took, and I timed them at 45 minutes. But I've also heard that the average time is a little over an hour, with some people taking as long as 3 hours. Pets are not allowed on the dunes. Next, I drove south back towards the campground to Empire Bluff Trail, another ranger recommendation. The trail's about 1.5 miles, and it leads to an overlook where you can admire the entirety of the dunes and watch an amazing sunset. You can bring your dog as long as they're on a leash no longer than 6 feet, but remember it's a 3-mile hike total. If you have a small dog with less stamina like mine, you might want to consider leaving them home. After walking for about 30 minutes, I almost turned around. It was getting dark, and I wasn't sure what I would even find at the end. So I checked my Waze, and I saw at least I was on the right track, and I kept going. There were benches to sit on, and it seemed to be a very popular place to watch the sunset. As a solo traveler, I appreciated this because it meant I had people to walk with on the 1.5 miles back to my car in semi-darkness after the official setting of the sun. The total hike and sunset watching took about 1.5 hours. There's a $25 vehicle pass needed to access and park within the park. If you'll be visiting more national parks in a 1-year period, you can purchase a yearly national park pass. I was thrilled to be able to purchase my Silver National Parks Pass this year. When you turn 62, you can purchase this pass for $80, and it's good for the rest of your life. My birthday was the day I chose to visit Sleeping Bear Dunes, so I was able to purchase my Silver Pass right at the campground. The next morning, I decided to do one more hike before I left, and I'm so glad I did. The name of the trail was Platte River Campground to Lake Michigan via railroad grade. This was a 2.5-mile hike from the campground parking lot. My site was in Loop 1, the farthest from the lot, but a loop that had electric hookups. So for me, it was about a 3.5-mile hike. The hike was very wooded and flat most of the way. Is it worth going to Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore? Yes. My only regret is that I didn't book 2 nights at the campground, but I am happy with what I was able to do in 18 hours. The mosquitoes and biting flies were making me wish I had bought bug spray. You were not allowed on the beach part of this trail. There were signs when you got to that point to remind you no dogs allowed. The last half mile or so, I found myself in soft, deep, white sand, which was more strenuous to walk through. The hike one way took about 45 minutes, and I almost turned back because I had to check out and move on that day. After looking on Waze again to see how much farther away Lake Michigan was, I kept on going, and I found myself the only person on the most beautiful beach I'd ever been on. The beach was natural and pristine, and the water was super clear and cold for this Florida girl. I sat down at the water's edge for a while just to take in the beauty of the location and celebrate sticking my toes in Lake Michigan, my fifth and final Great Lake, before heading back. Thanks for joining me as I continue year 2 of this full-time RV life.